Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you please call the roll, Ms. Rambo?
Jade Castile. Jim Jackson.
Here.
Pete McGorry.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Steve Pajali.
Here.
Connor Whalen. Mike Zuloff.
Here.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the January 24, 2024 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those? And if there's not any comments, I'd ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Miller.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I think that in the call to order and where they're listing the attendees, I'm not listed, but in the next item, I make a motion or do a second or something. I may have misread that.
Mr. Miller, you're always here even if you're not here.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm sure Ms. Rambo will note that and make that change if necessary on the,
I'm not hung up about it.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving into new business, the first item is 1636 Hayes Ave. Ms. Blair or Mr. Oakes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an application for a site plan review. The site is zoned LM Limited Manufacturing. The adjacent zoning to the north is RRB Residential Business. To the east is Limited Manufacturing. To the south and west is also Limited Manufacturing. The existing use of this site is it's currently a vacant parcel. The surrounding uses of this site are residential and commercial. The proposed use of this site is commercial. The site is approximately 0.27 acres. The property to the east is also owned by the applicant, and it is also used as a storage building. The new storage building will be the same front yard setback as the adjacent building to the east and the same use. They did receive a front yard setback variance on July 20th of 2023 to allow a 5-foot front yard setback, which will match the building to the east. The new building will be 40 foot by 130 foot and will be 5,200 square feet of storage. The site coverage will be 41.6%, which is below the 50% maximum threshold. There will be 26 10 by 20 storage units. The units on the front side of the building will have a 24-hour access, and the rear units will have access from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week. According to the requirements in section 1149.04 of the zoning code, measurement standard C, storage or warehouse may be waived with administrative approval, and if not approved by the administration, the planning commission may approve the waiver, and that's in reference to parking standards. Staff recommends waiving any parking requirements. However, the code still requires all access driveways be paved. The original site plan showed the site's driveways and parking areas to be concrete. An updated site plan was reviewed by staff and shows an aggregate drive type. I spoke with engineering. We believe that it's going to be an aggregate stone material. Planning your staff reviewed these changes on 3/21 of 2024 after the current packet was issued. Both planning and engineering have no concerns with these changes. With no additional parking requirements, there are no additional landscaping requirements. In general, staff recommends adding trees to any site plan improvement, even if it doesn't require any landscaping standards. In this case, adjacent to Hayes Ave to beautify the site would be preferred. There were several comments by other departments. Originally, engineering had noted that there's a need to rework stormwater drainage to reduce pipe outlet size to a 6-inch max. Originally, it was a 12-inch, and also to bowl out the areas around the catch basins and stone swales leading to the catch basins. On 3/20 of 2024, engineering stated they were satisfied with the updated plans and that the stormwater was going to be restricted based on the minimal size of the outflow pipes. So there's no further concerns from engineering. The building staff does have a concern still. They would request that the parcel to the east and the parcel of this application, both those parcel numbers are 57-05666.000 and 57-05665.001, be combined, and that is based on building code standards that you cannot have an access drive on another property onto the other. The police department and fire department had no concerns, and neither did the code compliance department. Staff recommends the approval of the proposed site plan at 1636 Hayes Ave with the following conditions. That's that all permits are obtained through the building department, engineering department, division of planning, and any other applicable agency prior to any construction. Excuse me, and also that parcel 57-05665.001 and parcel 57-05666.000 are combined prior to any construction. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, do I have a question?
Yes, sir.
Was there a reason why there was no landscape required?
Through the chair, yes, Mr. Jackson, it's because the site, if move forward as requested, which would be to waive any parking standards because it's a storage use, which in the past has been the approach taken, it would then eliminate any parking standard requirements. So without any parking standard requirements, we can't require landscaping outright. It's 1 tree per 25 spaces of landscaping would be required. So without the 25 spaces, we can't have any landscaping requirements.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zuloff.
it's a curious conclusion. I understand it, and I think you could equally say that if you're waiving the parking requirement, what would the parking requirement be were you not waiving it? And then what would the landscaping be? And then it seems like you could still meet that square footage of landscaping even though you're escaping a parking lot. It seems kind of counter to it could arguably be the counter to the intent of the standard that you could evade landscaping by having, like no parking at all. And I can see why, how much parking can you possibly need? You actually need some. I mean, you got to put your car someplace when you pull up, and you're not really parking. You're like, pulling up wherever it's convenient, and presumably no one else is in the way because they're storage units, right? So, but it seems like the intent is, if you got a site this size, that there might at least be something decorative and not an ocean of gravel or.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Mr. Zuloff's comments, if we were to take the aggregate, the total square footage of the storage building and calculate it based on the most closest, requirement, it'd be 1 space per 650 square feet of storage space, which would equal 8 parking space requirements. It's still below the 25, so we still couldn't
Thank you.
require landscaping.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oaks. Mr. McGorry?
So am I understanding that because of the type of building, storage building, there's automatically we're waiving the number of parking spaces, which takes it below the required amount? Is that correct?
Through the chair, so we traditionally have waived parking requirements. Even if we were to not, it would still just equal the 8 required spaces, which is below the 25 threshold to then activate the landscape requirements. Traditionally speaking, I believe, if I recall correctly, that we've waived the parking requirements because, for several reasons, some of it's because it's such a quick use. You come to your storage unit, you put something there, you take something out, you leave, was one of them. There's not a lot of long-term parking needs for this type of use, and therefore a lot of the previous applicants have requested specifically that it be waived so that they could put gravel as an example, or to not have to put landscaping in. We still ask the commission to consider landscaping even if there aren't parking requirements, and we're considering that today as well.
So are we, as a commission, being asked to waive the parking requirements?
Yes, it's
Oh.
to the commission's discretion.
Okay.
That's correct,
It's
yep.
just been the past practice to waive parking requirements for storage because it doesn't actually
And I understand
create
that
parking
logic. I
demand.
understand that logic. I just wanted to make sure what we were being requested, that it was not a
Not
decision
automatic.
already made. And I think in the presentation, staff had suggested some landscaping. has that been specified more, or is it just a generalized, where would you like to see a couple of landscape bushes?
Through the chair to Mr. McGorry, we don't have any quantitative examples or specifics on where and how many. In this case, the site is very minimal on where you could put them, so that's why we suggested along Hayes Ave, as it is a major corridor and it could add some beautification to the site. So there's no number that we have in mind, and I'll leave that up to the board to consider what is appropriate if you were to choose that path.
It's currently not written as a staff condition of approval.
Okay.
It's just a general recommendation that we typically add to site plans, just that the applicant consider.
I mean, it would certainly seem logical to me to throw a couple of bushes in a few nice places, wherever those nice places might be, and I wouldn't think that that would be a real high cost factor, but I guess it would come down to where they would go. So, okay, thank you. That answers my questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Other
Oh, I'm sorry.
comments?
Yes.
Mr.
I have a
Zula?
question. So I think there'd be a distinction between like no parking requirement at all. It would be kind of absurd to stripe a parking lot, a storage unit, because nobody stays there. They pull up to the unit. I think it's completely reasonable to allow room for people to pull up to the units, right? It's just like, makes no sense to stripe it. That's all. I have no problem at all with this site plan. If it was mine, I might want to.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the reason I brought that up,
Mr. Jackson?
the reason I brought that up was that at one time, that area right there was a place called Matthews Coal Yard. And I thought that, you know, it was to beautify it a little bit, it probably would help the community a little bit, the area that it's sitting in. So that's why I was wondering why.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I almost got to my point is that maybe just a few well-placed trees instead of a bunch of high-maintenance landscaping would actually add more, you know, more for less. We're a tree city after all. Just as a thought, and I'm not sure adding a think about it is productive as much as either we should require it or we shouldn't. And but I'm okay with whatever the board wants to do.
Any other comments from around the table? Mr. Miller?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Maybe a finer point, but, and a chicken and the egg argument. The thing about a requirement of a lot combination, I think in the past there have been times when the lot combination had to come first in order to be able to consider it, because ingress and egress to a site seems like a fundamental, but I'm perfectly willing to let it go. I just was wondering if something changed or if I'm misremembering the sequential deal, like combine the lots and then get the rezoning, or the other
Mr.
way
Oaks?
around?
Do you have a-
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Miller's comments, in most cases, that is best practice. Staff agrees with you. In this case, the building department gave us their feedback halfway through the process already, and we were comfortable taking it forward as presented, which would be to have a condition that before permits are issued, that they must combine those parcels.
I'm fine with it. I just thought it was unusual and wondered about the change in past practice.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zuloff?
I think Commissioner Miller is correct. If, like, for example, if it was a rezoning, you shouldn't rezone it until you do the lot combination if that's involved. In the case of site plan, if we condition it on then there's no, you know, it's not valid until they actually accomplish the conditions, I think.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add to that. So
Yes.
zoning will be reviewing all the structures for permits, so at least at a minimum, I will be able to stop progress if necessary, if it hasn't been accomplished. But the building department is up to speed and aware, and I have confidence that they'll also be able to catch it if needed.
I see the applicants are here. Would you like to come up and add anything to this discussion? You'd come up and state your name and your address for the record?
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Ruff, 1031 Perry Street, Sandusky. As to Alex, as far as the combining of the properties, that is in the process. I spoke with my attorney a week ago. He is taking all that, and he has all the information, and the properties will be combined. Just to follow up on landscaping, there is really no room to put trees along that 10-foot section that's left on the Hayes Ave side. That's where your sewer lines are going to be. You know, the drainage ditches will all be through there. So there wouldn't be any reason to put trees or unable to do such, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ruff.
If I could ask-
Mr. McGorry, and then I have a comment.
Sure.
Just a question for the applicant. So even in the two extreme corners along Hayes, right in the very corner, you couldn't stick a couple of small saplings? Would that still be problematic?
Yeah, in the front, because if you look at the drawings, you've got your drainage ditches will run down through that entire side, which would connect to the street. Now in the back east corner, there's already a couple of trees behind the fence, and there's also a telephone pole back there. So that'll all be cleaned up, and it'll all be, certain area alongside will probably be grass along through there to keep it up.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Zuloff. I'll let you ask your question. And then-
I understand that. No, the site plan doesn't show the drainage, but that's kind of good news because instead of trees, an opportunity might be for, and you could talk to Soil and Water, can advise on this. Engineering department might have something to say about, making it a rain garden kind of swale where where it can collect water and water can seep into the groundwater instead of running off and polluting the water. So it might be an opportunity to argue that you're doing some landscaping just by, letting some wildflowers grow in the ditch instead of having to mow it. I think Mr. Miller probably knows what I'm talking about, and probably everybody here, everyone on the commission and staff understands what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zuloff. My comment, and Mr. Ruff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if my revisionist history is wrong or misplaced, I do recall, didn't you come before the county land bank to acquire this property?
Yes, we did.
And at the time, it was a dumping ground with, if I remember correctly, with
Much, yeah.
tires and everything else. And your plan all along has been to go to some sort of storage units, I think.
Correct. That was our purpose, yes, when we purchased it. It's just taken us a little bit to get to this point, but yeah.
And you've done a good job, I think. I haven't kept up on the property of keeping it clean of debris and tires and everything that was dumped on there before. So I guess I would say if you wanted to do some landscaping, that would be great, but I would suggest that you've already beautified that property by what you've done to it and taken responsibility for keeping it clean. So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, you can see in the two pictures there, that was after the original building that was there was tore down. The car and the things and whatnot were left. I think there was also a boat on the lot, several tires, which we removed and cleaned up. We keep the grass mowed, keep it up, so.
Do you think there's a market for storage units?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if there are...
One more quick
One more question for Mr. Zuloff.
Yeah, so, by the way, I wouldn't work too hard on the brush in the back. I mean, even a little bit of brush, even a kind of a hedgerow brush is habitat, migrating birds and stuff like that. Nice green screen. Just my opinion.
Oh, yeah, we actually take care of the railroad property behind us also, because it's never, so when I mow the railroad property behind. We allow some of the things to grow up along the fence line, actually to keep drainage from the railroad property from coming. You clean it up too much and the railroad's just gonna continue to run towards us, which we've had in a couple places. So we've learned in the past that let's leave a little growth back there and kind of takes care of things a little bit, so. But
All right, thank you, Mr. Ruff. Any other questions for Mr. Ruff?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I'd like
Miller?
to move approval of the application subject to staff conditions.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Could I call for the roll, Ms. Rambo?
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
Steve Pajali,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
Jim Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next application, 1737 Tiffin Ave.
Thank you,
That
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Oaks?
That's me.
All
Thank
right.
you. So this is also for a site plan review of 1737 Tiffin Avenue. The site is zoned RB roadside business. To the north, south, and east is zone GB general business, and then to the west is RMF residential multifamily. The surrounding use of this site are both business and residential. Existing use of this site is currently vacant land. The proposed use is a restaurant/food truck venue, an all-around just shopping venue. The site is approximately .4915 acres. The applicant has purchased the property to develop it for a quick-service Caribbean-themed restaurant concept. There are future plans for adding 3 20-foot by 8-foot parking areas for transient food truck vendors, as well a walk-in cooler and a pad for a pop-up vendor. The permanent structure will be approximately 8 feet by 24 feet and will total 192 square feet. The project requires 2 off-street parking spaces as presented. The site plan proposal includes 13 parking spaces and a one-way drive-through lane with access from Harbor Boulevard. This development will create 2 full-time jobs. The building coverage will be 0.9%, which is well below the 50% max. There's actually not a max in the RB district, on that one. Parking coverage will be 8.98 square feet, and then the landscaping area will be 11,481 square feet. The proposed hours of operation will be from approximately 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 11 a.m. through 7 p.m. on Sundays. There'll be no indoor seating and will be predominantly drive-through and walk-up service. There will be outdoor seating for up to 24 people. A 6-foot fence along the multifamily residential district to the west is currently in the plans and will be on the property line as per our zoning code requirements. There's a 5.5-foot recommended by the commission approval for a fence along a residential district. The applicant is in compliance with that. A monument sign will also be placed along the entrance along Harbor Boulevard, and a sign permit will be required before construction of that sign, which I will be reviewing. The proposed site lighting is LED and is dark sky compliant according to the applicant.
And I'll mention that we did get a comment after we published this staff report that because that fixture design has the light pointing at a tilted angle and not pointing towards the ground, that it's not actually dark sky compliant, that we should work with the applicant to choose a different fixture. And I did speak with him before the meeting, and he was just fine with working with staff to pick a more compliant fixture for the site.
Thank you, Ms. Blair.
The parking proposal is below the 25 space threshold with 13 spaces and does not require the landscaping standards. With no additional parking requirements, those standards are not required. In general, staff recommends adding trees as any part of a site plan process and improvement. In this case, we recommend within the green area on the screen, which we are calling the recommended landscaping areas of focus. All yard area and height requirements are satisfied. This is a permitted use for this site. The engineering staff did have some comments, and their main concern is about the transient food vendors possibly dumping used cooking oil into the catch basins on the site. They've recommended adding a grease trap in line to minimize damage to city infrastructure. If food vendors were to misuse the drain, engineering recommends adding an additional grease dumpster for transit vendors if needed. The building department also had some feedback. They have no objection to this request, but additional submittals showing compliance with Ohio Building Code and ADA codes will be required prior to any construction. Police department had no objections. The fire department had concerns that all transient food trucks must remain 3 feet apart from each other and that They also must be 10 feet away from any openings in the permanent restaurant structure of the site plan. Code compliance had no objections to this request. Staff recommends the approval of the site plan for 1737 Tiffin Ave with the following conditions. That's that all applicable permits are obtained through the building department, engineering department, division of planning, and any other applicable agency prior to any construction. 2 is that the grease trap is constructed within catch basin CB-A in the parking area, and that illumination shall be designed and located, that light sources are shielded from adjoining residential districts. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
one
Mr.
comment to
Oaks.
add through the
Yes,
chair,
Ms.
thank you.
Blair.
This illustration is just for visualization of the site, but the site plan approval would be on the 2D plan, the line-drawn plan. And another comment to mention that their intention is to build this restaurant. So what's kind of seen in light blue is the drive-through, walk-up restaurant. The food trucks, the courtyard, that's all future phase. And we encourage them to bring this all at once so they can get their site plan approved and help see how this all works together. But their initial phase of development is just the single restaurant with the drive-through and the parking area.
Thank you. Comments from around the table. Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I'm trying to figure this out here. There's going to be food trucks, and they're not necessarily be the same food trucks every time you're going to go in there. Is that what they plan on doing?
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Jackson, that's kind of up in the air at the moment. Based on the brief conversations I've had with the applicant, it does sound like there'll be a normal reoccurrence of the same vendors, but the chance of having additional. But I would defer to the applicant for any specifics on that one.
Since they're going to be serving food, are there going to be restrooms on this site?
Mr. Chairman, I want to say, like I said, with previous conversations with the applicant, I do believe that the additional community mobile unit, it will also be restrooms, but I can't confirm that as well. I'd like the applicant to address that question.
Mr. Jackson, perhaps I will invite the applicant up to maybe clarify some of these points as we move forward. If you could state your name and address for the record and come up to the podium.
Miles Heiberger, 6724 US Highway 6, Vickery.
Do you, will there be restrooms on the site?
Initially, the main restaurant has a restroom inside for employees, and then as the project progresses, then we're going to include restrooms.
Because it's a drive-through facility in the first phase, you don't feel that restrooms will be needed?
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. Jackson, what was your other question?
No, that was it.
Was it on different food trucks or different?
Oh, yeah. Are there going to be the same food trucks, or every week there will be different food trucks in there?
The contracts that we have right now are, we got like 3 to choose from. The vendors would probably arrive like on a Friday and stay for the weekend. And if any are interested in being there throughout the month or the season, it would be a separate contract.
You're running the restaurant that's initially going to be on site, right?
Yeah, the restaurant itself, I will be managing.
What type of food are you going to be serving in that restaurant?
It's kind of a Caribbean-themed grill. We have like skewered meats, burgers, different chicken, Caribbean, pineapple stuff.
And like I mentioned to Ms. Blair, it's a unique concept, I think. But I kind of looked at it as like a Caribbean rallies, where rallies just drove through it. Later on, they put a picnic table out there, but originally it was just a drive-through. You'd pick up your food and move on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the first phase, and you would build out from there.
Yeah, the landscaping will reflect the theme and so forth, yeah.
And are you a Caribbean chef or a Caribbean chef?
I'm a great chef, yeah. But I have visited like Bahamas several times, and I have friends that are cooks down there and chefs. Okay. And we would like to carry some of that up here to add a little bit of culture to that side of town.
Can you do jerk chicken? Can you do jerk chicken?
That's one of the things on the menu, yes.
Other questions from around the table for Mr. Oaks?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zuloff.
All right, so I'm a little concerned. just echoing a concern that's already been raised, it would seem that if it turns into a food truck park and inevitably then on-site consumption be permitted, that you really need to do something, and it would be better to do something better than, like Porta-Johns. So 2 questions. The first question is, does anything in our code require restrooms in a drive-through restaurant? Probably not. I remember we had a Rally's or something, you drove through and there was no restaurant there. So the proposal as it stands wouldn't require a restroom, right?
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Zuloff's question, the zoning code is silent on restroom requirements. That would all reflect any Ohio building codes or standards for restroom requirements.
Okay. Okay, so it strikes me as, maybe this is a moving target. Maybe we have a hole or a gap in our ordinances, because when this stuff was written, food truck parks weren't exactly a thing, and I would imagine that the applicant might find it necessary to do something if this is the success that we all hope it is. But it's something to think about. I wonder if it would be appropriate to add the condition that if on-site consumption is permitted, then there shall be a public restroom available. Shouldn't be too, hard to do, but that's my thought. Let me get this out of the way. Regarding the lighting, I presume that there's going to be no problem just finding a. My guess is the fixture that you've shown mounted horizontally would be compliant. And if it isn't, it's not that hard to find one that is compliant. So we got no problem with that, right?
No
So if we add that as a condition, no big deal, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman.
Mr. McGorry.
Question for staff. If it were determined by the operator that he wanted to put a couple of porta potties during the high season, is that doable under city regulations or codes?
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. McGorry, as stated, our zoning code silent on any restroom requirements, and I don't recall any building codes off the top of my head that would require it. My assumption, which I don't like to go off of, is that there would be some type of requirement for porta potties, or there wouldn't be something in the way of him getting a porta potty if that was a necessity. But I can't speak on that.
My question, would there be any prohibition from using a porta potty?
There shouldn't be, as long as it's cited safely, because we have them in several of our city parks
Okay.
in the high season.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zuloff.
I think by any reasonable code, or that porta-johns should be considered a temporary measure. I mean, porta-johns is a permanent solution. If allowed, probably ought to be corrected in the code. Just my opinion. And, even our parks, I look askance on, indefinitely. Maybe that's defensible. You could defend that if you have a ball field, that it is a temporary measure because you're only using it during brief periods, during an event. Considering a porta as a permanent solution doesn't even seem reasonable in my world. But
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Blair.
my understanding of the building code is it would get triggered if there was a structure on the site, and there's no structure on the site where people would be eating indoors. So I don't know that there would be any trigger, but that would be something the Ohio Building Code would cover. My concern, if we added a condition that they had to include a restroom, is that we could potentially be adding hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost to their site, where a summertime porto, if they need it, it's the only time people are going to be sitting outside is when the weather's nice. So that's just my comments. And again, I'm not a professional or on the building code by any means.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to that
Mr. Zuloff.
response. So I'm not even suggesting that we should condition this on adding a restroom. My comment was as much about our general code as as it is about this particular application.
Might I
Go
add?
ahead.
So we have spec'd out a concession-style restroom that's also handicap accessible, and it's also mobile, so if we need to rearrange or put it in different locations, that's applicable to the project. So it looks as a permanent structure that is also mobile. They're very nice. They're box-shaped, as hopefully everything that will be permanent there reflects. I can provide pictures or examples of the restrooms that we've looked at. And they're also capable of being made permanent. They can be built in or they can be mobile.
And you would have no problem adding that to?
No, not at all.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Zuloff.
I would make the motion that we approve the application subject to the correction about the fully shielded lighting, and that if on-site consumption becomes dominant and if it becomes necessary, that the applicant add permanent restrooms.
Permanent or the mobile restroom that he mentioned?
Well, mobile could be mobile or permanent restrooms. I don't.
Mobile or permanent? Is there a?
With a second, we can discuss it.
Is there a second on that motion?
Could you repeat the motion?
Well, that we approve the application subject to the staff conditions and also correcting the fully shielded question regarding the lighting, which the applicant seems agreeable to, and that if on-site consumption becomes prominent, that that the applicant will add mobile or permanent restrooms.
I'll second
Is there a
it.
second?
I'll second it.
Discussion, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, like, how do you quantify predominant on-site consumption?
I'm not, but it gives us a leg to stand on if it becomes an issue.
Okay, just.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. McGory.
just for comparison purposes, the Sandusky Yacht Club uses a similar portable restroom facility like you're describing
Absolutely.
for their outdoor pool during the summer. It's a building on wheels. It's not a green phone booth porta potty. And so personally, I'm a little concerned as I'm reading between the lines of what Mr. Miller said, I'm concerned with the motion as made, how it would be interpreted, how it would be enforced. I'm personally more inclined that if there's no in-house seating, it's just drive-through, I'm inclined to not require any kind of restroom requirement and just leave it up to the applicant.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zuloff.
I think it's a reasonable view, but the applicant even agreed that it's just fine with him.
Mr. Chairman,
Just saying.
Mr. Oaks?
I would just like to make a note. It's going to be up to interpretation of what's presented at the time if there is a restroom expansion. But if it is considered a major change, it would come back to this board for additional review. If it's considered a minor change, staff can approve it and move forward as it is approved today. But I just want to put that on the record.
We could amend the motion, so.
Are you willing to amend the motion?
It's not my motion to amend. Any member can propose the motion is now the property of the board, and anyone can propose an amendment. How'd I do?
Mr. McGory,
If that's
would you like to
correct,
amend the
if
motion?
that's- I would like to make a motion to, is this appropriate, or is it better to amend the motion that's on the floor?
You vote on it or you amend it,
I
or
guess I would defer to Mr. Hastings to direct us.
You can, well, if you want to vote on this motion and it's voted down, you could make another motion, or you can make a motion to amend the motion that's on the floor.
I would go ahead and move to amend the motion to delete any conditions as to restrooms, but leave the rest of it as made.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion?
On the
If-
motion to amend.
On the motion to amend, yeah. If not, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Rambo?
David Miller,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
Steve Pajali,
Yes.
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so the motion's been amended.
Yes.
Now we still have to vote on the motion as amended?
If there's no further discussion, yeah. Sorry.
Well, yeah, okay, but I mean, we still have to vote on the issue.
Ms. Rambo, would you call the roll on that?
Okay. Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
Steve Pajali,
Yes.
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
David Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, thank you.
Good luck going forward.
Looking forward to
Yeah.
that jerk chicken.
We'll look forward to your, an invite to your open house. We'll look forward to the invite to your open house when you get open, so we can taste that Caribbean cuisine.
We'll be your taste testers.
All right, thank you. All right, moving into old business, we're back to the exciting dark sky lighting regulations. Do you want to take those, Ms. Blair?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll kind of tag team this. And I apologize, there was an earlier draft of our agenda that did not have the dark sky on it, and then we updated it, and the one on the website has this. So if you don't have it on yours, I apologize. We just wanted to start with a summary of what we've already talked about and move through a few updates according to questions that we were asked. So we brought you a proposal to change the zoning code last meeting in February to include a definition for fully shielded design and to add that language to our lighting regulation in the zoning code sections under definitions in landscape features and yard structures, in site illumination, and in streets. So anywhere that it would apply to new lighting in the zoning code, in the site plan review format is where we had brought that amendment. The purpose of bringing that forward based on direction that we've gotten from the commission in the past, including planning commission and members of city commission, is to preserve our view of the night sky by limiting light pollution as a public benefit and protect maritime navigation safety and preventing glare and overbrightness that can create nuisance and safety concerns. And if you don't mind flipping backwards once, Alec, this shows the light pollution from a satellite view, and you can see Ohio and Michigan, and really the detriment that can happen with light pollution. You can clearly see the larger cities, Detroit and Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Indianapolis are all glaring. You can see Chicago right there where it's faded out and how bright that light pollution occurs. And this is a chance that, it's a preventative chance for us to consider future lighting, so it would not be retroactive. It would be any future site plan review for exterior lighting to help reduce light pollution. These 5 principles are from Dark Sky International, and they have a lot of resources that help guide individual property owners and cities on why it's important and how to regulate and consider when you're doing outdoor lighting. So their 5 principles are when you're choosing light fixtures to make sure that it's useful, only use light if it's needed, if it's targeted, so directing light to fall where you want it to fall, pointing it towards the areas that you want to be lit and not, towards the sky where it's going to be wasted, for example. That it should be no brighter than necessary. When you use excessively bright light, it can actually decrease safety. It can be has other unintentional consequences. to control it. So they do recommend timers, which we did not bring any sort of changes that included that, but that is one of their recommendations. And that light is warm colored so that you're limiting the amount of blue-violet light to the very least as possible. And we've had several conversations about this, so just kind of recapping, we talked, it was in January, excuse me, we had the January 24th Planning Commission meeting. We did have a few calls and emails from planning commissioners, feedback. We facilitated a staff discussion. We have regular multi-departmental meetings with building and engineering to talk about site planning and anything that's in the pipeline. And so we used that forum to have a conversation with staff and then a conversation internally. So that's the discussions we've had to date. We also wanted to just give you a little bit of a picture of the research we conducted, and most of this was conducted by Mr. Oakes, and thank you, and brought forward some great examples from nationwide and regionally. So we looked at a number of ordinances from anywhere from Idaho, Michigan, Iowa, California, Ohio, and several Gibbonsburg, Wadsworth, Richfield, Maumee, and Westlake. So we looked close to home and we looked far beyond that as well for examples when we were conducting this research on what to bring to you. For example, the Star Valley, Arizona is where we got the fully shielded design definition that we brought forward for consideration. Overall, what we've heard since the January conversation is there's a general concern about enforcement. How do you enforce the lighting color? How do we enforce site plan in general? How would we enforce these regulations if we move forward? We have heard some individuals have asked that maybe we just regulate commercial or business uses and we remain silent on residential. And then we have heard concerns about the American flag, about maybe flagpoles being exempt and allowing light to project upward to illuminate flags. We have heard, so there was concern about the facade lighting language. Is it right? How would we adjust it? We did not get specific feedback and direction on what to change, just like, I don't know if this is right. We've been asked to confirm that fully shielded definition is compliant with international dark sky standards, and we were having a detailed conversation about fully shielded fixture versus cutoff fixtures, and just to make sure that the definition we bring forward and move forward with is correct, or would best fit what we're trying to achieve. There was one question brought up whether we could resolve this with a policy document change. So could staff have a policy document that we review through the site planning process and then bring things forward rather than codifying it in an ordinance, which I think further brings up to the enforcement question, if we could even legally do that. And then maybe the only do fully shielded definition, like reduce the amount of changes we make right away, just start with something small, we could add something later. There's been a number of concerns about existing light fixtures, and we just wanted to reiterate, if we do anything and change our planning and zoning code, it would only apply to new fixtures, new development, new site plans. The only time we would see it is if somebody's gonna build a brand new house, or, they're coming to you for site plan review. So it would be if it's a house that we're reviewing internally or commercial site plan review. That's how it's written. So it would not apply to anything that's existing in the city today. And that's the explanation of that last point. This is an example, this is from the Dark Sky website. So this is a garage, it's a house, and they have three kind of typical light fixtures. You can see some of the glare that is coming up and down. You can see a little bit of blue light glare. It's a very common fixture. And this is an example of imagery that they're using to show how glare can actually reduce safety, because safety is a concern that's come up. So if you shield the light from
That's a
your
great
eyes, then you can see there's actually a person standing next to this garage. That person is there in both images, but because the glare is making your pupils constrict, it's forcing your pupils to constrict, you cannot see the person that is next to the garage. So this is why a shielded fixture is actually safer, because it reduces glare, and you can see more in a dark environment at nighttime than if you had a glaring light. So we see three options for next steps. First would be, we could enact a policy document, and that's a question that we would need to discuss. We could move forward with just a fully shielded definition language and just for commercial. We could move forward as originally presented. So it's basically a keep doing what we're doing, which is basically working with applicants to bring you lighting, or we modify the language we brought forward, or we adopt the language we brought forward. And we have all of that if you want to get into it today. But mostly we just wanted to recap what we've heard and get a sense from y'all what you would like to do to move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Blair. Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I have a quick for Aaron. If somebody's building a new building or a new house, they would have to present their lighting on what they're going to be doing, present it to some board, not necessarily this board, but some board, or?
It would be this board, just like we brought the fixture design in the site plan today. It would be part of their site plan application. They would have to show what light fixtures they were going to use.
And even on a new house, they'd have to come before us.
If it was a new house, it would go to planning division. So we review single-family and two-family structures internally. We don't bring them to commission. If it's more
Only commercial buildings would be coming
so
to
it'd
the
be
board?
multifamily structures and commercial buildings. Anything that you review as a site plan now would just also include light fixture design as part of the site plan application.
Okay, thank you.
So it doesn't add anything new to applicants, but for submitting us the fixture design.
Other questions from around the table? Mr. Zuloff?
Yeah, I want to express my appreciation for the work that staff has done on this. No one can question whether you've been thorough or not. And I really appreciate that you've met with staff, met with various departments. I mean, that just kind of shows you've done your homework and we have something enforceable. I would caution anyone to always look out for the how are you going to enforce it argument, because that can be applied to virtually any legislation. You know, if somebody said, well, we should have speed limits, you'd say, well, how are we going to enforce it? Well, burn that bridge when you get to it, but yeah, you got to have speed limits, and you need a leg to stand on. And if, you know, if you don't have any speed limits at all, somebody driving in a place where 25 is appropriate, going 50, you can't do anything about it. Doesn't mean that you have to bust everyone for going 26, right? So I don't see enforcement as a problem. It's, you know, just like any other ordinance. I like that you're proposing the fully shielded language. That's the best practice. That's the best standard, and it's completely achievable, and quality stuff will meet that, and it's completely meetable. Other than that, good work.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Miller?
Chairman, I'd like to address the question to Mr. Zuloff. So what are you saying, Mike? We should move forward as originally presented or not?
Well, I'm not quite sure it's clear to me. So are these like three options for next step? So the second option, fully shielded, is that basically just amend the original presentation to define fully shielded and use that as the standard?
Yeah, if you'd like to do that, we could. So what we brought you originally had three major components. There was the definition, there's the commercial, there's the fully shielded, basically in commercial and residential, and there is the facade lighting, if you recall. Thanks, Alec. I think there's a summary slide in there. So we could reduce that and have fewer changes that just focused on fully shielded fixtures and start there. And commercial, that would be, that was one option.
So does the original proposal already say fully shielded then?
Yeah, the original proposal has a definition for fully shielded structure. and then it adds that definition, adds that requirement that
Okay.
exterior lighting be fully shielded into new residential and new
The
commercial.
reason I ask is because this definition of fully shielded does not conform to the industry's definition of fully shielded. Fully shielded in the world of lighting means it's attenuated at the last 10 degrees. This would be a definition for full cutoff. So that would be easy to fix, right? Overall, I think the original proposal was pretty good.
So I'm hearing a request, if we move a definition forward, to modify the definition from where it says projected below a horizontal plane and come up with some language that would better represent the illustration
Yeah.
of a fully shielded design.
Or alternatively, if we can be a little bit conversational here, alternatively, you could, instead of attempting to redefine the industry standard, simply, I don't know if you can get away with this or not, simply say fully shielded because it's such a broadly understood and accepted industry standard. I don't know if you can get away with that or not. That'd be one option. I think it would be better to correctly define or to define fully shielded according to what the industry understands to be fully shielded, because it's just a little detail here, but right now it's an eyebrow raiser because it doesn't conform to what fully shielded means in the industry. That's all.
We would definitely recommend having a definition. If we're going to pass anything,
Yeah,
pass a definition.
then let's take a second look at the definition and make sure we're consistent with the rest of the world.
Mr. McGorry?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I just am struggling personally. Now, again, I know one alternative is to have it be for commercial purposes, but just thinking with the overall concept of shielded lights, and I understand looking at that garage, and if you're looking right at the light, you can't see that person around the corner. If there were another light around the corner, you could. And when I think, for example, of sports stadiums, I mean, even with shielded so that it only goes down to where you want the whole stadium, so you have more lights, the whole stadium's lit up, whether it's Strobel Field or the Cedar Point Sports Force. I mean, that whole thing is lit up, and even if the light is straight down, you still see light coming out from the side. And I think, for example, in my own backyard, if this were to apply to new construction and residential, I don't have them on all the time, but at night, sometimes I might want to see if something's going on in the backyard, or I need to pick up something, or a big limb fell down, I want to see where it is. I turn on some regular floodlight fixtures. Now, I don't leave them on all the time, so I just am struggling to understand. I understand the concept of a goal of being able to look up and see stars, but there's other times, like, and also in a neighborhood, sometimes even if it's not necessary, nobody's working or walking there, sometimes it's nice to see that neighborhood lit up with globes, not huge, extremely bright light, but rather than to walk through a neighborhood and it's all dark because there's no light there. When I think about those various standards, or a minimal lit globe, but still to see a string of those globe lights through the neighborhood. So I don't know, I understand the concept of protecting night sky, but I'm struggling with exactly what we should do personally, so.
Ms. Blair, do you have any comment on
I have a recommendation that might alleviate your concern. So as we have it drafted for the commercial sites, it specifies, and it's based on the original language it's placed in now, that parking lot and wall-mounted light fixtures, et cetera, and I wonder if, for the residential site planning purpose, if we included that language, that it would be for parking area and wall-mounted. So if you're doing a floodlight, it should point down, but that would then eliminate the question about globe light lower to the ground, like along a walkway or something. Is that?
Well, I'm even thinking, like, whether it's the downtown or a park, where even if there's nobody walking there at the time, it's kind of nice to see the whole thing with some on poles, like a globe
Oh, you're
light.
talking like, yeah, this would say that they have to have some sort of shield.
And
The
so,
design of the
so if
fixture would have
if
a
the
shield.
so it's on a light, and if it's on a shield, then let's say that light goes straight down in a little pool of light.
Yeah.
But it's only this pool of light, 40 feet on, there's another pool of light, or, as opposed to an unshielded globe light that without a huge light in it, that that the whole area is minimally lit up. You can see there's nobody walking around, and that minimally lit globe
Come on.
light doesn't really, if you don't have too many watts in it, doesn't really glare at you. So I don't know. I don't know the right or wrong of this. I'm just concerned about not being able to have enough light for ambiance, if not safety.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zula.
I think these are valid concerns. But a really important thing that's not being discussed today, I've discussed it in the past, and the rationale for an awful lot of these ordinances is light trespass. The imposition of unwanted light on your neighbor's property. And we have very little to protect people against that, and and no leg to stand on. So if you happen to be within the visible distance of some commercial operation, and they can point their lights wherever they want, then your property rights are being violated. The lighting should be necessary. It should follow all the principles that Ms. Blair outlined, and one of those protections that we need is if it's not necessary, and you don't want, 1,000 watts pointed at your bedroom window, you should have the right to and the standing to do something about it. That's all it's one of the things we're doing here. Light trespass is when you frame it that way, when you think about inflicting unwanted light on other properties, and that's been an issue in this county on a couple of points and in a couple of times. That's the other side of it. And I'm not invalidating by any those concerns, but you got to think about that side of it too.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Yes.
address the law
Yes.
director with a question,
Yes.
just to see if I'm on the right page here. We have a meeting convened with 5 representatives of a board of 7. So now that we have 5 in a legal meeting, then 3 votes would carry an affirmative motion, right? And so 3 votes in this case would be pass or approval by this board.
Under the Roberts Rules of Order, through the chairman, that is the case. Although Sandusky does have a special rule with regard to the commission itself.
City Commission, right?
Yeah, the
but not
city
us.
commission, not the planning commission. So I need to look this up to make sure there's nothing in the ordinance.
Sure, go ahead and look it up, and I've got a question for Ms. Blair. Just from my understanding, the shielded lights, say those lower lights around the walkway, around the Chesapeake, that kind of point the light down, would those be considered shielded lights?
Are you talking about the bollard ones?
Yes.
Those, I think, would count as full cutoff, so they do have a shield. They don't have like a cone that's pointing it down.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Would you
Shannon.
go to that diagram?
The
Al?
lighting around the Chesapeake, the walkway,
No, those are not compliant, in my opinion.
those are not compliant.
No.
This one.
Well, they don't
So they're
throw
more
off
of
much
what they
light.
would call like the bats. They've got
They're not
like
very
a
good.
top,
They could be better.
but they don't have they're not directing the light downward.
There are much better available. We just didn't know what we were doing when we did that.
But my point is, they don't throw off much light. It creates some ambiance
They're
along that
using low
walkway,
light.
but they
Yes.
don't throw off much light.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, but I would argue that you could create the same ambience, maybe a better ambience, without having them shine in your face. You can light the ground, create the ambiance without having them glare in your eyes. And whether it glares in your eyes kind of depends on how young your eyes are too, right?
Mr. McGorry?
Just looking at these examples, so in the unacceptable and the very bad, or even the bad, it seems to me that that example is an example of a high wattage bulb in the light. And if you have a low wattage light, so really you just see the lamp itself lit, that shows minimal lighting all the way along. And so, I don't know, I'd be a fan of having unshielded fixtures, but very low wattage, and I don't know how you deal with that. That's my personal perception and what I like, so.
All right, Mr. McGorry.
I mean, to walk through a park with a string of the better fixture, or even the best one with no light, you know, I'm thinking of a college quadrangle where I went to college. You walked up at the edge of the quadrangle, you saw the whole area minimally lit, and it didn't seem to be offensive in any way. And I wouldn't be a fan of just like flashlights shining down at the ground.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Wait, Mr. Zulu,
Yeah.
are you done,
Sorry.
Mr. McGorry?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Zulu.
So I'm going to take exception to this diagram. It's deceptive. What's better, what they're calling fully shielded, actually allows horizontal light just at a lower luminosity. It's the last 10 degrees. So this is an imperfect, this sort of shows the principle, but it's an imperfect vision. And if the quadrangle was well lit and everything was lit, yet you didn't see any glare, it was probably done with fully shielded, right? The bad, what they're calling the bad here, would be termed in the industry full cutoff. In other words, it doesn't let anything go skyward, but you can be quite a distance away and it can glare in your eyes. And of course, the very bad just wastes. When you're on the ground, there's not much difference between very bad part of it going skyward and bad. In fact, there's little difference between all three of those because you're on the ground. You have no idea what's up above. The beauty in fully shielded is it attenuates, you can't get rid of it completely, but it attenuates the light that's in your eyes. So if you saw a beautifully lit area where you could see clearly and it didn't glare, it was probably done with fully shielded. This is not a new principle. It's just, it takes experts, it takes expertise. These standards that have been developed are very counterintuitive. It takes some study to even understand. I don't want to, be an intellectual snob about it, but it takes some study, it takes some reading, it takes some expertise to get to these conclusions. And one of the difficulties with lighting ordinances, it's not intuitive. It's sort of beyond common sense. It's more like uncommon sense that comes to the right conclusion. At some point, you got to go with the experts instead of, just my opinion.
Mr. Hastings, do you have the answer to the Robert's Rules?
Yes, I reviewed Chapter 161, which is the part of the Sandusky Codified Ordinances that establishes the Planning Commission. There is no specific requirement of a number to pass a resolution. So therefore, my conclusion would be that you follow the Robert's Rules of Order. It'd be a majority of a quorum.
Okay. And I have one additional question. The policy document that Ms. Blair refers to, how would that work?
I mean, if we pass it?
Well, yeah, if we went with the policy document, just out of curiosity, I wondered how something like that, it would be a document that we would refer to, and then the planners would bring that to us for consideration?
Yeah, I think you would still need commission approval of that document to make it enforceable. City overall commission. But yeah, it could then be part of the review process of new applicants.
But it wouldn't be codified, right?
Doesn't have to be codified.
Yeah.
Codified is just a publishing decision, but
Yes.
it could be.
Okay.
There's an example, if I may, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The public vending ordinance, which is not and under the purview of Planning Commission. There is we have a code for public vending, and City Commission passes that code. And the code says that there's an annual program document supplied by Planning Division in the code, so that's what makes the annual program document enforceable. So if you wanted the guidelines or whatever the policy document would be to be more flexible than a code change, we could bring something forward that said there's a policy, there's a review document or something. I would have to work with the law department, obviously.
Okay.
So then, once City Commission granted the permission, then that could be a more flexible document.
Okay. Mr. McGorry?
A question for the law director. Do any nuisance laws apply as far as shining a bright light in your neighbor's window?
Through the chairman to Mr.
Mr.
McGorry, there are no current nuisance laws in Sandusky like that. I'm certainly aware of nuisance laws in other cities where I have worked, Shaker Heights, and that do have excessive lighting as part of their nuisance laws.
Okay.
But Mr. Hastings, is there a section in the zoning code that would address that?
Nuisance laws are not in the zoning.
Not nuisance, but would address the light issue?
Well,
In a
yeah,
resi-
one of the big differences, of course, as already mentioned tonight, is a zoning code change can only apply prospectively.
Yes.
A nuisance code actually applies to all existing lighting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Oaks.
On the screen now, Chapter 1145.17, Landscape Features and Yard Structures, letter F, Other Structures. This is the current language in the black lettering in our code right now. This is the closest thing we have to address that question of nuisance. And it states, floodlights, searchlights, loudspeakers, or similar structures shall not be erected or used in a residential district in any manner that will cause hazards or annoyance to the public generally or to the occupants of the neighboring property.
All right.
And where, this is a proposed.
The in black, it's existing.
existing.
The red is what we brought forward. but
Oh,
That's existing in the code right now.
I guess my last question would be to Ms. Blair and Mr. Oaks. Do you have a recommendation on these options? What would you prefer? And
We brought forward what we thought was a good proposal to regulate the shielded fixtures and the color temperature. After hearing feedback of concern of whether we could reasonably enforce the color temperature, I think we could cut that. I'd love to see it. I think it makes a big difference from the human experience to have warmer light rather than the bright blue light, because the bright blue light is more like daylight, so it messes up with your systems.
Circadian
your
rhythm.
Circadian rhythms. I didn't even know that word. I think the fully shielded is the simplest thing to go forward, to create a definition and to focus on the design of the features to move forward would be the simplest thing to start with, and we could always add later.
Mr. McGorry?
just a question whenever
Yes,
you're ready.
go ahead. You could ask your question
So I'm
now.
curious, kind of like this issue of the legislation for what can be taught in schools about things. Have there been any complaints about the lighting situation? I'm curious how this has come forward. I know it's important to Mr. Zuloff, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, and also to Mr. Miller. But from a general standpoint, have there been complaints about lighting?
After speaking with the police department, we do not have an overwhelming number of lighting nuisance cases. There are a few cases where neighbors have said, lighting is pointing in my bedroom, is disrupting my sleep. But talking with code compliance, talking with the police department is not something that we hear a lot of nuisance calls
And
about.
would those complaints fit under the language that exists already?
Those complaints would be better suited as nuisance cases, which we had discussed potentially bringing changes to the nuisance ordinance, the city commission. We have heard from, I would say, like 3 or 4 stakeholders, including Mr. Zuloff, that dark sky is important for us to consider, because it's something that if you don't do it, 10 years later, you'll be like, oh my gosh, we could have done something and we didn't. And it's more of a preventative thing than something that it's not something you bring forward because it's responsive to complaints. It's something you bring forward to prevent future complaints. It's a kind of a very forward-looking policy. Can I add one more comment? Do you mind
Yes.
going back to the design?
Can we stay on the complaints just for a second? Because you're changing the subject, and I'd like to, may I?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Mr. Zula.
so I wouldn't complain. I have, I've got a city street light, lighting up my bedroom. I can't complain because we don't have anything to cover it. It would be a pointless complaint. So I'm saying it would be I would question the standard of we don't have any complaints because nobody knows that they have any standing to complain. I think if people knew that if, somebody was inflicting unwanted light and unreasonable amounts on their property, that they could complain, they would. It's just not, it's kind of a new idea. Lighting ordinances are relatively new, and people don't know that they have, that they potentially have this protection. So I think it's a fair point that people aren't complaining, but I think people have plenty of gripes about light, in particular, boaters who can't see navigational aids because of unnecessary light, or people who would like to look up and see the stars and they don't think they can do anything about it, but we actually can because the public doesn't know that anything can be done about it.
Ms. Blair.
Thank you. Just to finish up that thought, so there's national advocacy groups that are advocating for this. There's advocacy groups in other cities that are advocating for this. There is not a organized public group in Sandusky that's advocating for this at present time, but there is plenty of examples of that nationwide. I just wanted to make one comment about this for folks that are watching at home, and for you all. The judgment statements of unacceptable and bad and very bad. This is a diagram we took from the Dark Sky website. Those are not our language, and if we keep using this, I'll change it because really the definitions, if you look at it all the way to the left, the globe fixture that would allow light in all directions, that is a no cutoff, an unshielded fixture. What they're calling very bad is a partial cutoff. That's what a lot of our downtown, the old downtown from the 90s streetscapes, where you can see a little bit of the bulb and then it's got a little hat on. And then what they're calling bad, that's a cutoff fixture, so it's completely covered on the horizontal plane. And then there's the fully shielded, which has more of a cone or some sort of design that would direct the light downward. And what they're calling best would be on a timer. But those are not staff's judgment words on this slide.
Right, and my point before, Mr. Chairman, was that the better fully shielded here is to explain a principle of the attenuation, and it's technically, I don't think they were attempting to be technically correct here. They were just trying to explain the principle. It would be, in my mind, less effective at making the point, but more technically correct to show a much wider cone and then dimmer light all the way to horizontal. That would be an accurate depiction of what industry standard fully shielded would be like. In other words, very similar to bad, except that you'd have much dimmer light at the last 10 degrees approaching horizontal, which would weaken their point at the expense, would be more technically incorrect at the expense of weakening the point they're trying to make here.
Just a couple of quick comments. With Mr. Zuloff's comments on enforcement, I agree. Enforcement is not a reason. Being able to enforce or not enforce is not a reason to move forward on something like this. Although I hesitate to put something on the books that we can't enforce or we don't have the manpower to enforce. To me, that creates more of an issue than not having it at all, because people have expectations of enforcement that we can't live up to. And my other feeling is that I like the idea of, especially since Mr. Zuloff points out that this is new and people aren't aware of these lighting or could be lighting regulations. I like the idea of starting slow and moving into it, kind of adjusting as we go along. That would be my preference. But what say ye around the table? Does somebody want to make a motion, or do we just?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could, one more. So, I kind of lost my thought.
That's what I thought I would ask.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should expend anything on running around enforcing this. I think what we should do is, if somebody's got a gripe, give them a leg to stand on. If somebody's got, an egregious light trespass, they can point to the ordinance and say, hey, I got a gripe here. We have lots and lots of stuff that's complaint-based. You don't have to run around looking for things to go after. But if a citizen has a complaint, give them a leg to stand on. That's what this would do. And I'm not invalidating your point that I agree, we shouldn't devote resources running around looking for lights that are too bright. But what we should do is give somebody a leg to stand on when they feel like they're being hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Zuloff. Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I just have a question as far as enforcement is concerned. Let's say we put in a new street and Ohio Edison is putting up streetlights on that new street. Would they be bound to put in fully shielded streetlights?
Ms. Blair?
For the way it's written, it would only be in the subdivision ordinance. The only time we would see an enforcement mechanism for new streets would be we're building new streets with new street lighting. So it wouldn't require, if there's one light fixture on a street that's established that's burnt out, it would not require them to replace that single fixture with a different type of fixture.
But on a new street, it would.
On a new street, it would. And they do have options that that are shielded.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to that. So as an example, if this would have been in place during the adoption of the Cold Creek subdivision, this could have been included on the plat as part, or also the HOA requirements, which aren't obviously being enforced, but are in place legally. That's part of the legal descriptions of the properties. This could have also been added to the legal descriptions.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Zuloff?
We have examples of compliance stuff now. If you go to the east end of Water Street, those bronze fixtures with the square rectangular things, those are compliant, right? Much of the street lighting, I believe we pay for. The city pays for that. I think that if we don't have to put up with any street lighting that we don't like as a city, right? So it's not like the electric company comes and puts up streetlights because there's a street there. It's like we pay for that. And they certainly can provide options according to our standards. By the way, the Cobra lights, the Cobra headlights that you see, the common light with the kind of arching, that's sort of like a poster child. That's kind of an example of bad practice. They've been around for a long time. It's what people expect, and it's what people accept only because they don't know that there are better options. And we do have some examples by the Yacht Club. You look at those lights, it looks better, it doesn't shine in your eyes, and it works.
So, Ms. Blair, and forgive me for not knowing the zoning code inside and out like my colleagues around the table, but with the Caribbean restaurant or the Caribbean restaurant this evening, we flagged the light, right? We made sure we had that lighting right. And with Mr. Crable's site plan, when he came, we adjusted the lighting for that. How would that change if we move forward with the shielded lighting? It seems like we're almost doing it now, right?
Procedurally, what you would see is really no change because we're already having those policy discussions with applicants. For us, on the front end, it would be much easier for us to direct them to what we're asking for because we would have a clear definition that everybody agreed on. And so it would be when we direct, because there's a lot of back and forth that goes when we get a site plan. People have site plans ideas, they have site plan sketches. There's times where we meet, the applicant with the restaurant today, we've met with him several times, 3 or 4 times in person over the phone to get all the information we need. So if we, as much as possible, when we have clear definitions for applicants, it gets it's a smoother process for them.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So,
I
Mr.
may,
Oaks,
to-
and
just-
then I'm going to ask for some type of decision around the table.
To add to Ms. Blair's comments, it also helps enforcement if that were to become an issue. If we have a definition in place, we can then, like as an example, the fully shielded definition, we could look at that, go to the site, see, oh, that is in fact fully shielded or not, and then have some room to stand on and as far as enforcement's concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Oaks. Did you want to add anything, Mr. Hastings?
No, Your Honor.
I thought you looked like you were going to say something. What say ye?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, but I'm not sure how to make it. Could staff provide the words that for what they're recommending?
Is your intention to move forward with everything we brought forward at the original meeting with the definition change that you wanted? Or is it to reduce the scope of that in some capacity based on the conversations that we've had?
Let's do something that we can support.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Miller.
let me make a motion to move forward as originally presented with the revision of the definition of fully shielded.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
So.
Mr.
make
McGrory?
sure- Thank you. I'm trying to understand, so that would apply to both prospective residential and commercial, correct?
It would be new site plan, whenever we review site plans, so whether it's residential or commercial, it would apply, and subdivisions. So any brand-new development.
But individual residents would not be covered by that then, am I understanding it correctly?
There would
Because we
be-
don't deal with,
There's no time or trigger in our current code that would have us reviewing anytime a resident puts a new light fixture at their house. The only time we would review it for compliance with this language is if it was a brand-new build, a brand-new residential building.
but what if it was like a total remodel for,
The only time we're reviewing site plans with, Mr. Oaks, I can ask you, because you do this on a daily, if you're reviewing a shed proposal, would the exterior lighting conditions as we have them drafted apply in a shed or garage?
Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Blair's question,
Mr. Oaks?
yes, it would. It's very rare that sheds, I know it's just an example, but it's very rare that sheds would have lighting on them. I have not seen them in the building plans that I've approved, very rarely, maybe one of every 100. I think that's even high. But yes, it would apply to that as well.
So it would be expansions on a property, a new garage, a new shed. So it would be new construction. If there's exterior lighting with new construction, that's when we would review it and apply these code.
And as another example, if you were to,
residents, like for example, that rebuild pretty much, well, by across the street from the existing police station, that right on the corner of Meg Street and I think, is it East Washington? That house,
It would be Market.
okay.
Yeah, Market and Meg's.
So this proposal would apply to that.
There was no site plan approval on that, I don't think.
You're talking about the individual single families that are built, the new ones?
Kind of across from what were the tennis courts in the parking lot. It's.
They put a new addition on it.
Right,
Yeah, they added on
A
that.
big new
the cottage there,
It
it's
was
like
an
a,
existing property. They added on.
but I mean, the whole thing has been rebuilt
Sure,
though.
yeah, it's
Mr. McGorry,
Just south of the Maritime Museum.
Yeah.
Mr.
it would
McGorry?
have- If something like that would come for us tomorrow, or,
After-
whenever
after this were passed.
after this were passed, it would,
Have applied to
the
that.
exterior lighting would be one of our questions we would ask when they.
But that didn't come to us, did it?
Mr. Chairman, I can comment on that. I reviewed that as it was a
Mr.
residential
Oaks, yeah.
expansion. So I reviewed that. That was, I believe, late 2021, if not early 2022. It's the Navy Cottage, is that correct?
Right.
They had the additional garage that's
Right,
attached.
right.
So that that would, the garage portion, the new portion of that structure, if it were to be today, and this was in place, the language that we're talking about tonight, the new addition, any lighting on it would be reviewed for dark sky compliance.
So if he wanted, as part of the remodeling, kind of lantern type outside side lights on each edge of the garage, and this passed, it would have required some sort of a shielded fixture, not like artificial gas lit lanterns.
Yeah, that's correct, and I don't want to get into the weeds, but part of the policy we brought in front of you is also allowing, in certain cases, depending on how it's designed, fixtures for the side of buildings that could be lit upward as long as the building absorbs it. So in that case, you'd have to review that the building would absorb any uplight, and that would be appropriate.
Does that create some heartburn for you, Mr. McGuire? And what if the suggestion was made that we limit it to just to new subdivisions?
Say that again, what?
If we limited the residential portion to new subdivisions?
Mr. Chairman?
Say the second, limit the residential to what now?
New subdivision.
New subdivisions, yeah. Mr.,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead. Mr. Zullo?
Yeah. Well, I think, I've talked to a lot of people about this. I think most people don't know too much about it, and once they understand the principle, most people are fine with it. And nobody likes being told, you can't do what you like. Maybe there should be an education component to this, and maybe that doesn't have to be in the ordinance. Maybe it would be wise for the city to explain what we're doing and why. And I think you'd get a lot of support, offsetting any concerns about, but I can't put my globe that I like up. And I don't want to deride that. I mean, I kind of like the look too. I don't dispute that there's a charm to the streetlights that we have. In downtown, or a globe light, or I'm just trying to balance, the pros and cons, and I think most people get it when explained the benefits of doing this. So
I think that might be true, but I think that ultimately we may get a lot of people standing at that podium complaining because we're trying to dictate the type of lighting they can put on their garage or something like that. Mr. McGuire?
And I'm not trying to extend this meeting out and belabor it, but for example, I really like what was done on that particular house that I'm talking about. And it's kind of a New England cottagey type of a place. And I think it's a great upgrade for the city, and I can't even think what kind of fixtures they've got on it, because there's got to be something there because it's finished. But if they were like coach light lanterns with almost artificial gas lights in them, but really electric little candles that kind of flicker a little bit, they hardly put out any light. It's almost cosmetic or decorative, and it certainly isn't going to prohibit me looking at stars up in the sky. And if I'm understanding it correctly, they couldn't put those there if this were under this new legislation. It would have to be some sort of a downlit.
Right.
And that's what I object to if they wanted to have those coach side lanterns on each side of the garage door. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I be fair with the response?
Ms. Blair has a comment.
I wonder if we could solve that. In the current draft, we have when used, exterior light fixtures shall be, et cetera. What if it's non-decorative exterior light fixtures? Could there, and maybe I think we would workshop that. Could we workshop that to have some sort of exemption for what's clearly decorative lighting versus flood lighting?
Yeah.
Which is the concern.
Is-
Flood lighting is the primary concern.
Point of order are you addressing the chair?
through the chair.
I recognized her. yes.
Right, so you're addressing the chair,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Zuloff? do you have
Yes, thank you,
comments?
thank you. Just to respond, so I'm not disputing that we had great results with fixtures that you liked. I'm going to point out that you could have had great results, maybe even better, or maybe not quite as good, with compliant fixtures. And even the coach flight type fixtures are available in compliant versions, right? Now, you're not going to get a white globe that's compliant. It just ain't going to happen, right? It's not possible. It's just the physics of it, right? But there are some great choices that are compliant that carry all that charm, and those great results can be achieved and at the same time respect the rights of others, unnecessary lighting, economic, environmentally friendly considerations, navigation, and everybody else's rights too. That's the point that I think needs to refute the idea that somehow this will obviate beautiful, attractive results. It won't.
Any other, Mr. McGorry?
I totally agree with the concept of protecting night sky and the navigation thing. What concerns me is making some kind of rule that limits choice short of those things. Because I think a lot of the fixtures we're talking about, decorative fixtures, don't affect the night sky and don't affect navigation. And I'm concerned that we're going to start limiting choices. So I don't know.
Yeah,
So it's a slippery slope argument.
I think I could live with the compromise that Ms. Blair suggested. And I guess I would ask Mr. Hastings if it's, okay, if we take decorative lighting out and we don't enforce that, if we keep track of complaints that start to pour in because people suggest that we should have included decorative lighting because they can't sleep at night, we could probably amend this down the road, Mr. Hastings, or
Yes,
am
yeah,
I wrong in
and-
my assumption?
No, you can amend it down the road, and you can pass a nuisance ordinance as well. So
Yes.
the commission has full power to change it.
Good point.
Do you,
I'd rather proceed on limiting under the nuisance going forward. I
Well-
think that's a simpler process.
Could I make a motion that we suspend debate and vote?
wait, we have a motion on the table, right?
Yeah.
Right, right.
Oh,
This
but I
is-
think I know what he's doing. Go ahead.
Okay, go on.
This is calling the question. You get to vote on that. I'm moving that we suspend debate and vote. Technically, it's often done by acquiescence and nobody objects, but you could call for a vote on calling the question.
A call for the vote?
Can I just say the motion again to make sure? Are we voting to
Mr. Miller?
approve it with a revision to the definition? Okay,
That was my motion.
and that's what we're voting on?
With the revision to the definition?
With the revision to definition of fully shielded.
Okay.
The mic thing.
Not the removing the,
Okay, sorry.
call for the vote?
Steve Pajali,
No.
Pete McGorry,
No.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
Jim Jackson,
Wow. Yes.
David Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Well, we certainly were thorough.
Yes, we definitely had spirited discussion this time. Okay, if there's no other business, we'll stand adjourned, and I guess our next meeting is April 4th at 5 PM?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
That's a special
Yes,
meeting?
Special meeting,
Yeah.
5 PM, yep,
Yes.
April 4th.
Okay, we will come back on April 4th for more fun and games.
I'm going to go out and buy some new light fixtures.
Quick before the ordinance takes effect, right?
All right, thank you.
High wattage bulbs.
You could change the light fixtures and nobody would even know you changed.
Did we get a motion to adjourn? Did we do that?
Pete, well, I don't think, do we need a mo, do we need, yeah, I can just move to adjourn.
No, you did.